The sound that broke my life in two wasn't a crash or a scream. It was my son's voice, soft and reasonable, drifting from the study down the long, shadowed hall. Outside, the main fog was so thick it seemed to swallow the sound of the ocean, leaving only the lonely call of a distant foghorn. In my hand was a silver thermos, his favorite tea, still warm. I had been on my way to his room, a small act of love for the son who had come home to help his aging mother sort out her affairs. But the light under the study door had stopped me, and the words I heard through the old oak door, those words froze the blood in my veins. "No, she has no idea about the market value," Leo was saying, his voice a smooth, confident murmur. "She just thinks of it as home. Her mind isn't what it used to be, you understand. A clean liquidation is the kindest way forward for everyone." I stood there, hidden by the dim light of the hallway, and the woman who had raised him, who had loved him with every fiber of her being, simply ceased to exist. In her place stood a stranger in her own home, listening to her only child paint her as a relic, an obstacle to be managed. The day had started with such clarity, the kind of sharp, clean morning you only get on the coast of Maine after a storm. The air smelled of salt and wet pine, a scent that had been the backdrop to my entire life with my husband, Richard. He had built this house, not just with wood and stone, but with his soul. Every beam, every window facing the sea was a testament to his love for this place, and for me. After he passed, the house became my sanctuary, a living album of our memories. But a house this large, with its portfolio of Richard's architectural copyrights and assets, was too much for one person to manage indefinitely. So when my son, Leo, offered to help, my heart had swelled with gratitude. He arrived from the city with spreadsheets and a kind, patient smile, talking about legacy planning and securing my future. He'd brought a stack of documents for me to sign, a power of attorney he said would allow him to handle the boring financial footwork. I had signed them without a second thought, my signature flowing easily across the pages, a testament to a mother's boundless trust. We had agreed that the first step was to formally transfer the property deeds into a trust, a task that required an original appraisal document from Richard's archives, a room I hadn't truly sorted through since his passing. That was what had sent me downstairs, to that hallway, at that exact moment. I was looking for a piece of paper, a formality. Instead, I found the truth. I leaned against the cool wall, the silver thermos suddenly feeling as heavy as lead. My breath was trapped in my chest. I tried to make sense of it, to find some other explanation for his words. Maybe I had misheard. Maybe the wealth manager on the other end of the phone had misunderstood. But Leo's next words erased all doubt. "The cognitive assessment is just a formality," he said with a dry little chuckle. "I've been noting her episodes, forgetting names, misplacing things. It's a classic picture. The doctors will see it. We just need to move before she decides to do something sentimental and irrational." Sentimental, irrational. He was talking about me. He was building a case against my mind, brick by brick, with feigned concern and fabricated evidence. Every time I'd forgotten my keys, every story I'd repeated, it wasn't a simple sign of aging to him. It was a data point. It was ammunition. The warmth from the thermos seemed to seep away, replaced by a profound, spreading cold that had nothing to do with the damp sea air. I looked down the hall towards the study door. Behind it was a man I had taught to read, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose heartbreaks I had mended. Now he was methodically, calmly, planning to erase me. I didn't make a sound. I didn't drop the thermos. I simply backed away, melting into the shadows of the hallway that had always been my home, the silence wrapping around me like a shroud. But as the initial shock began to recede, it was replaced by something else. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a cold, hard clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog in my mind was gone. He thought I was a ghost in my own life. He had no idea I was about to start haunting him. I didn't go to my room. Sleep was an impossible luxury, a relic from a life that had ended just an hour ago. Instead, I waited, listening to the old house settle around me, each creak and groan a familiar comfort that now felt like a warning. I heard Leo's footsteps on the stairs, the soft click of his bedroom door, and then silence. A profound, waiting silence. In that quiet, I didn't crumble. The headmistress in me, the woman who had managed hundreds of students and faculty with calm authority for 30 years, took over. Grief and shock were emotions, and emotions could be set aside. What I needed now were facts. Ked to the end of the hall and opened the door to Richard's study, his archives. It was not a dusty, forgotten room. Richard was meticulous. It was a library of his life's work, with flat-file cabinets lining one wall and tubes of blueprints stacked neatly in custom-built cubbies, each one labeled in his precise, architectural script. The air still held the faint, clean scent of paper and drafting ink. This room had always felt like the center of his mind, and tonight I needed his mind more than ever. My supposed reason for being here was to find the original appraisal for the estate, a simple document, but that was a task for the woman I was pretending to be. My true purpose was different. I wasn't just searching for a piece of paper. I was searching for a piece of my husband. I was searching for an answer to the question that echoed in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Did he know? Did he have any inkling of the man our son would become? My fingers, steady and sure, moved past the blueprints for civic centers and museums. I was drawn, as I always was, to the very first cubby in the rack. It was labeled simply, "The Aliner, Maine." It was our home, his masterpiece, he always called it. He poured every bit of his genius and his love into its design. I pulled the heavy tube from its slot, the cardboard cool beneath my hands. It felt different from the others, heavier. I carried it to the large drafting table that dominated the center of the room and switched on the green-shaded lamp. The soft glow illuminated a universe of dust motes dancing in the still air. I carefully removed the cap and slid the tightly rolled vellum onto the table. But as the last of the roll cleared the tube, something else slid out with a soft thud. It wasn't a blueprint. It was a book. A hardcover ledger bound in dark green leather, the kind accountants used decades ago. It had no title on the cover. It was completely anonymous. And next to it, a tiny flash drive, no bigger than my thumb, with a small, handwritten label taped to its silver casing. My breath caught. 4 letters, written in Richard's familiar hand. For Aliner. My hands trembled as I reached for the ledger. It fell open to a page dated 5 years ago, just before his last illness took hold. The page was filled with his script, not the precise block letters of his blueprints, but his flowing, personal handwriting. It wasn't just a list of assets. It was a secret inventory, a private narrative of our financial life. He had logged the real-world values of his copyrights, the private offers he'd received for his portfolio, notes on shell corporations designed to hide assets. It was a meticulous, devastating account of a fortune far greater than the one Leo had presented to me, and in the margins there were notes. "Leo is impatient," one read. "He sees the building but not the foundation. He must be guided, not just given." On another page, next to a staggering valuation for his design software patents, he had simply written, "Protect this from fire and from haste." I sank into his leather chair, the cool material a shock against my skin. He had known. He hadn't known the specific betrayal, the chilling words I had overheard tonight, but he had seen the cracks in his own son's character. He had seen the haste, the ambition that bordered on avarice. This ledger wasn't just an accounting of our wealth, it was a warning. It was his last act of love, his final attempt to protect me, to protect his life's work. And the flash drive. My fingers closed around the tiny piece of plastic and metal. It was a key. But to what door? I had no idea how to access it, what secrets it held. The ledger was a map, but the flash drive felt like the destination. Staring at the glowing screen of the dormant computer on the desk, I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who understood this world of digital secrets and legal fortresses. I needed someone sharp, someone loyal, someone who saw the world not just in black and white, but in the subtle, dangerous shades of gray. The memory of a brilliant, determined young man from years ago surfaced in my mind, a boy whose potential I had seen and nurtured. My hand reached for the old Rolodex on the corner of the desk, its paper cards yellowed with age, but its contents suddenly more valuable than anything else in the room. The Rolodex felt like an artifact from another era, but the names within it were timeless. My fingers, surprisingly steady, flipped past faded cards until they landed on one. Benjamin Carter. Underneath, in my own neat script, was a phone number and the note, "NYU Law, Class of 15. I remembered Ben as if it were yesterday. He had been part of a mentorship program I volunteered for after my retirement, a brilliant, fiercely idealistic young man with a mind like a steel trap. I saw in him a deep-seated integrity that was rare, and I had championed him, written his letters of recommendation and followed his burgeoning career from afar. He was now a junior partner at a respected firm in New York. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the phone, the silence of the house pressing in as I punched in the numbers. He answered on the second ring, his voice professional and alert. Ben Carter. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, but I kept my voice even measured. Ben, I said, this is Alina Ainsworth. I hope I'm not disturbing you. The professionalism in his voice instantly melted away, replaced by genuine warmth. Mrs. Ainsworth, not at all. It's an honor to hear from you. Is everything all right? I took a moment, choosing my words carefully. I find myself in a delicate legal situation, Ben. It's personal. I need advice from someone I trust, not just for their skill, but for their character. Your name was the only one that came to mind. There was a pause on the other end, and then he said, his voice now laced with concern, I'll be there tomorrow. Just tell me the address. Ben arrived the next afternoon, his car crunching on the gravel drive, a sharp, modern sound against the timeless whisper of the sea. He was just as I remembered, sharp and focused in a well-tailored suit, but his eyes held a softness, a respect that immediately put me at ease. I led him to Richard's study, which now felt less like a sanctuary of memories and more like a command center. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid the green leather ledger on the drafting table between us and explained the situation, not with the emotional turmoil of a grieving widow, but with the cool, factual precision of a headmistress laying out a case. I told him about Leo's plan, the power of attorney, and the words I had overheard. His expression grew harder, colder, with every word I spoke. When I finished, he simply nodded, his jaw tight. You taught me that the foundation of any argument is indisputable evidence, he said, his voice low. It seems your husband taught you the same thing. His eyes fell upon the small flash drive on the table. And what is this? He asked. I believe, I said, it's Richard's final word on the matter, but it's password protected. Ben connected the drive to his laptop, and a simple, unadorned password box appeared on the screen. There were no hints, no security questions, just a blank field, a digital wall built by my husband. Ben looked at me. It would have to be something only you would know, Mrs. Ainsworth, something personal. My mind raced through a lifetime of shared secrets. Anniversaries, pet names, the names of our favorite books. But Richard was never that simple. He was a man of metaphor, of poetry. My eyes drifted to the large window overlooking the Atlantic, where the fog was beginning to roll in again, clinging to the dark pine trees at the edge of the property. And then it came to me, a line from a Frost poem he loved, when he would always whisper to me when the world outside the windows disappeared into the mist. The woods are lovely, dark and deep. I spoke the words aloud, my voice barely a whisper. Ben typed them in, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Nothing. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I closed my own and continued the verse just as Richard would have. But I have promises to keep. Ben added the second half of the line. He hit enter. The password box vanished. A single video file appeared on the screen. He turned the laptop towards me. When he clicked play, the face that filled the screen was Richard's. He looked older, tired, the illness having already carved new lines into his handsome face. But his eyes were clear, and they looked directly into the camera, as if looking directly at me across time. Hello, my Alina, he began, his voice raspy but full of love. If you are watching this, it means you have found my little insurance policy. It means you are in the trouble I hoped would never come. He went on to explain everything. He spoke of the ledger as his book of truth. He talked about Leo, not with anger, but with a deep, sorrowful understanding. He's a good boy, Alina, but the world of easy money has made him impatient. He doesn't see the soul in the work. And then he gave me his instructions. He laid out a precise, step-by-step legal strategy. Revoke the power of attorney. Get an independent cognitive and medical evaluation immediately. Consolidate control of the intellectual property copyrights into a new trust, in my name only. His voice was my husband's, but his words were those of a master strategist. This house, this work, it is our story, Alina. Don't let him sell it off chapter by chapter. The value is in the legacy, not the liquidity. The video ended. The screen went dark, but his presence, his guidance, filled the silent room. I looked at Ben. The look of concern was gone, replaced by a steely determination. He was no longer just helping a former mentor. He was now the executor of a great man's last wish. The fog of my uncertainty Ad lifted. I now had a map, a weapon, and an ally. The game had a new set of rules, and I was about to write them. The days that followed were the hardest of my life. They required a performance so complete, so draining, that I often felt I might lose myself in the character I had created. A frail, confused old woman, adrift in the fog of her own mind. While Ben worked tirelessly from his office in New York, filing motions and preparing affidavits with the silent efficiency of a master craftsman, my role was on the front lines, in the theater of my own home. My performance began subtly. It started with small hesitations, a name I couldn't quite recall, a story I would begin with enthusiasm only to let it trail off into a sigh of frustration. "Oh, never mind," I'd say, waving a dismissive hand. "It's gone." I watched Leo's eyes when I did this. At first, there was a flicker of something, annoyance, pity, but soon it settled into a look of smug confirmation. This was exactly what he expected. This was the mother he needed me to be. I was giving him the gift of a clear conscience. My props were the simple objects of a life. A set of keys I would misplace, only to have him find them in the sugar bowl. An important letter from the bank that I would open, stare at with a furrowed brow, and then hand to him, saying, "Leo, dear, could you look at this for me? The numbers all jumble together these days." And he would take it, his touch now tinged with a patronizing gentleness. "Of course, Mom, don't you worry about a thing. I'll handle it." Every time he said it, "I'll handle it," a piece of me recoiled, but I learned to smile, a grateful, vacant smile that cost me more than he could ever imagine. My most important prop, however, was my smartphone, a gift from Leo himself for my last birthday. "To help you stay connected, Mom," he had said. Oh, it was helping me stay connected, all right. Before he would arrive for his daily check-in, I would open the voice memo app, press the red record button, and place the phone screen down on a side table or a bookshelf, another object seemingly forgotten. It would lie there, a silent digital ear, capturing every word, every sigh, every carefully worded deception. As my performance of helplessness grew, so did his confidence, and with it, his carelessness. He began to treat my presence as he would a piece of furniture, something that was there, but not truly listening, not truly comprehending. He started taking his business calls in the living room while I sat nearby, ostensibly engrossed in a crossword puzzle. I would listen, my pen hovering over the page as he spoke to the wealth manager. "Yes, the portfolio liquidation is on track," he'd say, his voice crisp and professional. "She's completely on board. She understands it's for her own security." He spoke of my security while actively planning to steal it. He spoke of my consent while ensuring I had no capacity to give it. One afternoon, I heard him on the phone with a real estate agent, a woman with a sharp, aggressive voice. "We're looking for a quick private sale," Leo told her. "An off-market deal. The owner is eager to downsize and is motivated to sell below market value for a fast, no-contingency closing." He was giving away my home, Richard's legacy, at a discount, all for the speed of the transaction. Each word was a nail in the coffin he was building for my life, and my phone, my silent ally, recorded every single hammer blow. The most chilling recording came on a Tuesday. I had asked him what day it was, a classic piece of my repertoire. After he told me, he patted my hand. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm making an appointment for you with a Dr. Albright. He's a specialist, very kind. He's just going to ask you a few questions, help us get a baseline of your memory. It's important to have these things documented." The name hung in the air between us. Dr. Albright. He wasn't just speculating about my cognitive decline anymore. He had found a doctor. He was actively procuring the weapon he intended to use against me. I simply nodded and said, "That sounds nice, dear," as my heart turned to a block of ice. That night, in the solitude of my bedroom, with the sound of the ocean a mournful whisper outside, I listened back to the day's recordings. I transferred the audio files to a secure cloud server Ben had set up for me, labeling each one with the date and a brief description. "Call with real estate agent. Discussion of Dr. Albright." Listening to my son's calm, measured voice detail my destruction was a unique form of torture. There was no triumph in it, no thrill of the chase. There was only the grim, methodical work of gathering stones. I had more than enough now. The foundation of his lies was complete. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he would soon give me the perfect opportunity to bring it all crashing down. The summons came, as I knew it would on a Friday. Leo approached me in the Arden, his face a perfect mask of filial duty. "Mom," he began, his voice gentle, "Mr. Davies, the wealth manager, is driving up from Boston on Wednesday. We'll have a small meeting here in the dining room. It's just to sign the final papers for the trust. It's the last step. Then you won't have to worry about any of this ever again." He smiled, believing he was delivering wonderful news, a final liberation for his frail mother. I looked up from the rose bush I was tending, Richard's favorite crimson variety, and met his gaze. I returned his smile, though mine felt different, ancient, and knowing. "That sounds lovely, dear," I said, my voice as soft as a petal. "Wednesday will be fine." He saw my compliance. He saw the quiet, agreeable old woman from his script. He didn't see the thorns. He didn't see the shears I held in my hand. Wednesday dawned gray and atmospheric, the sea and sky melting into a single sheet of silver. I chose the formal dining room for the meeting. I wanted the weight of history in the air. I wanted Richard's portrait, hanging over the mahogany sideboard to bear witness. I sat at the head of the long, polished table, a place that had been mine for 40 years. Leo sat to my right, looking triumphant, his papers arranged in a neat, predatory stack. Opposite him sat Mr. Davies, a man with a silver watch and eyes that held the flat, emotionless gleam of a calculator. He offered me a bloodless smile and spoke of market volatility and asset protection. I nodded, letting his words wash over me, a meaningless tide. To them, I was a ghost at the feast, a ceremonial figurehead for my own dismantling. They had no idea I was the one who had set the table. Leo began the proceedings, his voice smooth as he walked Mr. Davies through the final stages of his plan. He spoke of my desire to simplify my life, my willingness to place my trust in his judgment. I remained silent, my hands resting in my lap, my posture serene. Finally, he slid a thick document across the gleaming wood towards me, a pen placed carefully beside it. "So, if you'll just sign here, Mom, we can conclude the transfer." This was it, the final moment of his play. And the first moment of mine. I did not pick up the pen. Instead, I looked directly at Leo, my gaze clear and steady for the first time in weeks. "Before we proceed," I said, my voice resonating with an authority that made both men sit up straighter, "there is a small matter to address. I believe my legal counsel would like to join us." Leo's smile faltered. "Your counsel," he stammered. "Mom, I'm your counsel in this." I gave him a small, sad smile. "No, Leo, you are not." At my signal, a large television screen at the end of the room flickered to life. Ben's face appeared, sharp and clear, his office in New York visible behind him. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but edged with steel. "My name is Benjamin Carter. I am representing Mrs. Alina Ainsworth." Leo's face went pale. Mr. Davies shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Before either could speak, I said, "Ben, if you would. My husband left a brief message he wanted me to share." Ben nodded, and Richard's face filled the screen. He looked directly into the camera, directly at us. "Hello, my Alina," he said, his voice filling the silent room. "If you are watching this, it means you are in the trouble I hoped would never come." He's a good boy, Alina, but the world of easy money has made him impatient. The value is in the legacy, not the liquidity. Leo stared at his father's image, his mouth slightly agape, all color drained from his face. As the video ended, Ben's live image returned. "For the record," Ben stated, his voice now sharp and official, "as of 9 a.m. yesterday, any and all previously executed powers of attorney granted to Mr. Leo Ainsworth have been legally revoked and are null and void." He shared his screen, and a notarized legal document filled the television. "Furthermore," Ben continued, "we have here a full cognitive and neurological evaluation of Mrs. Ainsworth, conducted by Dr. Alastair Finch of Johns Hopkins University, confirming she is of exceptionally sound mind and judgment." Another document flashed onto the screen, filled with medical language that all pointed to one simple, devastating conclusion. And then came the final, killing blow. "And finally," Ben said, his eyes fixed on Leo through the screen, "we have reason to believe this entire process was predicated on fraudulent misrepresentation." He played the audio. My living room filled with the sound of Leo's own voice, recorded just days earlier. We all heard him telling the real estate agent about the motivated seller who was ready to sell below market value for a fast, no-contingency closing. We all heard him telling me about Dr. Albright, the specialist he had found to document my supposed decline. The sound of his own calm, condescending voice, plotting his mother's ruin, was a poison in the air. When recording stopped, the silence in the room was absolute. It was a silence of pure humiliation. Mr. Davies was the first to break. He stood abruptly, gathering his papers with shaking hands. "My firm, we were not aware of these circumstances," he stammered, not looking at Leo, not looking at me. "We formally withdraw our services, effective immediately." He practically fled the room. Leo didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the blank signature line on the document in front of him, the pen lying uselessly beside it. His empire, so carefully constructed, had been dismantled in less than 10 minutes. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He slowly rose to his feet, his face a hollow mask, and walked out of the dining room, out of the front door, without another word. I was alone at the head of my table, in the quiet of my house, the taste of victory as clean and cold as the salt air outside. In the moments after the front door clicked shut, a new kind of silence descended upon the house. It wasn't the heavy, waiting silence of the days before, thick with unspoken truths and secret recordings. This was a clean silence, a silence of ownership. It was the sound of the house breathing again, its old wood settling, the air clearing as if after a long coastal storm. I didn't feel a surge of triumph or the hot flush of anger. I simply felt present. I walked through the rooms of my home, and touched the familiar surfaces, the cool marble of the fireplace mantel, the worn leather of Richard's favorite armchair. They felt different, as if I was feeling them for the first time with my own hands, not through the fog of grief or the haze of a presumed decline. The house was no longer just a sanctuary of memories. It was my fortress, and I was its sole, undisputed commander. Days turned into a week. I didn't hear from Leo, and I didn't reach out. The space he had occupied with his false concern was now filled with other things. The sound of Ben's reassuring voice on the phone, finalizing the legal fortifications. The scent of salt and roses from the garden, which I now tended to with a renewed sense of purpose, and the quiet, powerful presence of Richard's work. I spent my afternoons back in his study, not as a detective searching for clues, but as a curator of a great legacy. I unrolled the old blueprints, marveling again at the genius in his lines, the vision in his designs. I held the green leather ledger in my hands, no longer as a weapon, but as a history book. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this legacy couldn't be contained in a vault or represented by a number on a balance sheet. It needed to breathe. It needed to grow. It needed to inspire. That was when the idea took root. I wouldn't sell a single blueprint. I wouldn't liquidate a single asset. Instead, I would use the very fortune Leo had tried to steal to create something new. I called Ben and told him my plan, to establish the Richard Ainsworth Foundation. Its purpose would be to provide a full scholarship each year to a promising, underprivileged architecture student at his alma mater, Columbia University. We would convert part of the estate into a retreat, a place where young architects could come to study his work, to be inspired by the sea and the sky that had so inspired him. His legacy wouldn't be sold off. It would be invested in the future. It would be given away, freely and with purpose. The fortune that had nearly torn my family apart would now be used to build new ones. In making this decision, I realized the final piece of my own story had clicked into place. This ordeal, born of a terrible betrayal, had given me an unexpected gift. It had forced me to stop being a passive custodian of my husband's memory and to become an active architect of my own future. It had reawakened the head mistress, the strategist, the woman who did not merely endure, but who built. This story, I've realized, isn't just mine. It's the story of anyone who has ever been underestimated, overlooked, or made to feel invisible in their own life. It's for anyone who has had their voice silenced, not by volume, but by the quiet, condescending assumption that they no longer have anything important to say. The world is full of people who will try to write your final chapters for you, to define you by your age, by your perceived frailty, by their own selfish needs. They will count on your silence, believing it to be weakness, when in fact it can be your greatest source of strength. It can be the quiet where you listen, where you observe, where you gather your facts and forge your plan. It can be the calm before you create your own storm. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt that silence, I hope it served as a reminder of the power you hold. You are the author of your own life, and you have the right to edit, revise, and rewrite your narrative at any time. Please share this story with anyone who might need to hear that tea. Air voice matters. Press the like button if you believe that dignity has no age limit and that a quiet mind can be the most formidable force in the room. And please, subscribe to our channel for more stories that celebrate the deep, unwavering resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for listening and for bearing witness.